Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for today's HIPA webinar. Today we are going to present to you a new state aid scheme, which is a compensation scheme to improve competitiveness. But before doing that, please allow me just to recap on the main points of the Economic Action Plan of Hungary, and also just to show you the results of the subsidy program to improve competitiveness. As you all know, the pandemic that we are faced with today is first and foremost a healthcare challenge. And luckily we can say that here in Hungary we have been successfully managing the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic. But in the meantime, this challenging time also applies to the economic situation, because the current coronavirus pandemic also resulted in an economic challenge that we have to manage. That is why we have decided to launch an economic action plan, which amounts to 18 to 20% of the Hungarian GDP, which is probably the largest volume single economic action plan of the economic history of the country. Just to recap on the main pillars of the economic action plan, I would like to summarize the four main pillars of this program. First and foremost, the number one priority is to maintain the jobs that have been successfully created during the last 10 years, because between the period of 2010 and 2019, more than 820,000 jobs have been created in Hungary, which is a country of 10 million people. Therefore, the first priority is to maintain the jobs that have been created. Under this pillar, I think it's worthwhile to highlight some of the programs that have been initiated, such as the wage support program, which has been launched to support lost wages up to 70%, and also the wage compensation program for R&D employees, which is covering for 3 months 40% of the average wage of the sector. In addition to that, I think it's worthwhile to highlight that the working time banking has been extended to a period of 2 years. The second pillar is about job creation, because even during the difficult times of the pandemic, we should try to focus and concentrate on potential new investments and potential new jobs which are created as a result of these new investments. Under this second pillar, we have been already initiating a new incentive scheme to improve competitiveness, and today we are presenting the second bullet, which is a new compensation scheme to improve competitiveness, and I will talk about the details together with my colleague in the second part of this presentation. In addition to that, under this pillar, we are also initiating new training programs, especially in the field of IT, and we are launching large infrastructure development programs to underpin the economy under these difficult days. The third pillar of the program is about sector-specific measures which aim to relaunch the economy in selected sectors which are either increasing in their importance because of the pandemic or have been the hardest hit. And last but not least, the fourth pillar is about financing, because under difficult circumstances, the main focus of corporate executives is to maintain liquidity of their corporations. Therefore, we have introduced new loan programs, and also equity funds have been mobilized in order to support companies in financial difficulties. Within the framework and under the umbrella of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, I would like to highlight that the Exim Bank has introduced 3 new programs, 2 loan programs and a credit program, and also an insurance program under the umbrella of MEHIB, the insurance company. Now, to move on and to concentrate on those measures which belong to the Hungarian Investment Promotion Agency, I would like to summarize to you the form of incentives that exist. And what I would like to mention to you is that we basically have 3+2 legal titles under which we can provide financial assistance to companies. We have the 3 classical forms of subsidies, such as the regional aid, such as the training subsidy, and also the research and development support. These are the programs that we have been continuously running in the past years, But now, during the current pandemic, we have been able to launch 2 new programs as of today. Number 1 is the Subsidy to Improve Competitiveness, which was opened on the 21st of April, and we have closed the applications on the 28th of May. And the second one, which is the Compensation Scheme to Improve Competitiveness, that we are launching today. Before moving on to the new program, let me just show you the timeline of these new schemes. So as I mentioned, because of the pandemic, the European Commission adopted a temporary framework under which member states are allowed to support companies up to 800,000 euro from their own budget without restrictions. And based on this program, we have adopted the first incentive program under this coronavirus pandemic, which is the Subsidy program to improve competitiveness. As you can see, have launched it on the 21st of April, and we have suspended it on the 28th of May, based on the submissions we have received during this bit more than a month period. And today we are initiating a new program, which we call Compensation to Improve Competitiveness. Now let's have a look at these 2 programs, which are related to economic recovery, which are related to the coronavirus pandemic. First, I will briefly summarize the results of the first program that has been running successfully, and then afterwards we will introduce to you the second program, which is the new program, the program for compensation to improve competitiveness. The first program is a program that we have launched in April, and as you can see from the slide, more than 800 companies have applied. This means that more than 800 mid-sized corporations and large-sized enterprises have applied under this program, and they have committed themselves in their applications to more than 1 billion euros of investment, and these investments are to be completed until the middle of next year, so until 30th of June 2021. And in return of the maintenance of jobs and the investment commitment, the Hungarian government is providing subsidy to these companies. To this date, basically until end of day yesterday, we have come to a situation that 568 positive decisions have been taken by the donor, 474 deeds have been signed, and more than 200 companies have already received payments under this first program. Now, before we move on to the new program and the main highlight of today's webinar, please let us show you a short video that will summarize in 2 minutes the main requirements of the first incentive program under the coronavirus pandemic. And afterwards, I will give the floor to my colleague, Mirtil Oszlánszky, who will present to you the new program, the Compensation Scheme to Improve Competitiveness. On the 19th of March, the European Commission has adopted a temporary framework according to which member states have the opportunity to introduce state aid programs to support companies which are adversely affected by the current coronavirus pandemic. Accordingly, on the 20th of April, following a successful notification, Hungary has launched a program to improve competitiveness of companies. According to the program, investments can be supported up to 800,000 euro. And for companies which decide to start these new investments, the maximum aid intensity is 50%.
Azt a döntést hoztuk, hogy mi olyan beruházásokat támogatunk, amelyeken keresztül munkahelyek jönnek létre, illetve a meglévő munkahelyek megvédése lehetővé válik. Számunkra legfontosabb az, hogy legyenek olyan vállalatok, amelyek a mostani körülmények közepette is elég bátrak ahhoz, hogy beruházásokat hajtsanak végre, modernizálják a termelő eszközeiket, és ezen keresztül az új világgazdasági korszakban egy olyan jó startpozíciót tudjanak felvenni, amely a versenyképességük javítását tudja garantálni.
Well, our expectation with this program on the one hand is that we will be able to maintain and keep a lot of jobs which potentially otherwise would be endangered by the current crisis. Number two, we hope that we are able to accelerate investment decisions which are otherwise being postponed. And number three, we hope that when the economy is restarting after the crisis, Hungary will be at a strong position at the start grid.
Thank you for the opportunity to address to you today. I am Mirti Loszlansky, representing the Incentive Directorate, and I would like to provide you my brief presentation about the newly introduced scheme to compensate the damages and losses of the large enterprises suffered due to the coronavirus outbreak and the related administrative measures that the Hungarian government had to implement in order to minimize the spread of the virus. Since Hungary has notified successfully its new measure to the EU Commission, the Hungarian government has already allocated 50 billion Hungarian forints, which is approximately 140 million euro, for this new compensation scheme, which will be available for every applicant. The form of this type of support will be non-refundable cash grant provided in Hungarian forints, and the novelty of this newly introduced scheme that the support will be available in each region of Hungary, including Budapest also, and the companies have the opportunity to choose between the disbursement method. So it can be a payment in advance to the total compensation amount, or it can be a post-finance payment, just like in the well-known VIP cash grant system. Based on the evaluation of the application, the donor and the beneficiary will conclude an agreement on the compensation amount, and from legally point of view, the donor will be the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. However, the procedure will be managed by the Hungarian Investment Promotion Agency. Now, moving on to the next slide, it is important to understand the main pillars of this system. And one of the main pillars of this newly introduced scheme is the eligibility criteria. So who is entitled for this support? This support will be accessible for large enterprises at a group level that are active in all sectors, and with the exemption of primary agricultural production, fisheries, and aquacultural sectors. However, during the evaluation procedure, we will measure the contribution of the companies to the Hungarian economic recovery. Therefore, this will be measured under the investment volume of at least 1.6 million euro to Hungary. In this regard, there are some other sectors that are excluded, which are also in the non-eligible conditions under the regional aid scheme as well. The second main pillar is the amount of the compensation of the scheme. So the amount of the compensation and this financial support can cover 100% of the incurred losses of the companies. However, it cannot be higher than 50% of the investment volume, which realized by the company per legal entity. Since the allocated budget has its limitation, the donor makes an individual decision on the compensation amount based on 5 key elements of the evaluation. One of these key elements is the level of the contribution to the economic recovery of Hungary, which is the realization of an investment of at least 1.6 million euro. The second main point is the investment location and the economic development of this investment location, while the third main point is attached to the sectors that the applicants are active in, whether it is in a non-economically preferred area or it is an economically preferred area. The fourth main point may be the most important out of the 5, since our task during these turbulent times is to help and to ensure the companies to maintain the already existing jobs and the related gross wages, while the fifth main point will be the relative losses based on the operating profits comparison. Now moving on to the conditions, what I would like to explain to you, since EU state aid rules allow to compensate damages and losses during extraordinary circumstances, the companies have to fulfill different types of conditions, such as realized or expected losses during the compensation period, decline of at least 25% in net sales revenue or in orders during the compensation period compared to the reference period. And, the most importantly, the connection between the losses and the administrative measures and recommendations due to the COVID-19 situation. On the other hand, there are some conditions attached to the commitments. The companies have the opportunity to realize their investments in the chosen date. It can be June the 30th in 2022 or September the 30th in 2021, depending on the type of the collateral that the company commit to provide for the compensation. The other main condition attached to the commitments is the maintenance of the already existing jobs. As I discussed, one of the main conditions is the proof of decline of at least 25% in net sales revenues or orders during the compensation period compared to the reference period. But we have to define the compensation period and reference period firstly. The compensation period is the period when the decline happened in 2021 between March the 12th to August the 31st. This maximized in 172 days, and the company have the possibility to choose between this time frame. The reference period is the same period that is defined as a compensation period just in the last closed financial year, which will be 2019 in each cases. Another main focus is on the amount of losses. It is important to calculate, it is one of the key elements to calculate the compensation amount. So it is important to know how much loss realized a company during this year. And for this, we made up an EBIT comparison formula. So the companies have to determine the difference between the operating profit realized during the reference period and the operating profit realized during the compensation period as well. And the reference period in this regard, in general, will be the operating profit of the reference year on an average, multiply with the length of the compensation period in days. Compared to the previous slide, we have to investigate and examine the situation when a company is affected by seasonality, because in this case the calculation is slightly differently for the amount of losses, since there the company chooses the compensation period, and then we have to be in line with this compensation period, so the amount of losses will be determined between the exact same period. And what does it mean that the company is affected by seasonality? When the daily average revenues for a given period in the last consecutive business year deviates by more than 25%, than the daily average revenues for the entire year, the company will qualify as an undertaking affected by seasonality. And for the last steps, I would like to introduce you the procedure how the companies can apply for this scheme. In each time, HIPA will provide consultation before the application, and after the application will be made officially, the companies will receive a confirmation letter within a 1 week period, which will be issued by the donor. And after that, the company is entitled to start the investment. And after that, the donor makes its individual decision based on the application and the evaluation of the application. And after that, HIPA will issue an incentive offer to the companies. This means that in case the companies receive this offer, the companies have to accept this offer with reference to the already known amount. And after that, we will conclude an incentive agreement. We will conclude a compensation agreement in each time. But in order to disburse this compensation, the companies have to enter into force this agreement, which means that the collaterals have to be submitted, whether it is a bank guarantee and authorization letters or authorization letters only. Remember, in each case, the realization time of the investment may differ, as you can see on the slide as well. And after the disbursement is made, HIPA will carry out an ex post evaluation based on the financial reports of the independent auditors and determine the actual damage in order to avoid the overcompensation. Thank you for the attention. Please allow me to give back the floor to Mr. Robert Éschig for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mirtil, for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention and for joining us at today's HIPA webinar. We appreciate that you might have a lot of questions about the newly introduced compensation scheme. That is why we have decided to create a dedicated email address under which we are looking forward to receiving your questions, because we know that, first of all, this is a new scheme, and it also took us 2 months to make an agreement with the European Commission about it. So we expect your questions. And also because we believe that we are talking about large-scale investments, and similar to the VIP cash grant procedure, we would like to have a direct discussion with you before you are submitting your applications. So we look forward to receiving your questions and comments under this new email address, and later on, hopefully, receiving your applications as well. Thank you once again for joining us, and have a nice day.